Don't know what's going on, but hopefully everything's going to be working again. Let's see. Nope, looks like it's locked up. Lovely. Gotta love technology. So the good news is we do have Mr. Charles Peak on there. Charles, how you doing, sir?
Hey, brother.
Well, appears that maybe the camera is not working properly, but you can at least hear me. You can see some of the graphics that we have on the screen. I'm going to be able to share the video, Charles, that you sent along, and you want to kind of jump on here because you got some important information and kind of like a public service announcement, if you will, considering everything that you've seen severe weather wise and all the damage associated with it. So just kind of take us through what you wanted to mention.
Yeah, Dan, it's a situation working with the Weather Channel. I cover all over the country, and in the last 10 days have just been sort of horrific of what the storms I've been on, the ones in Mississippi, both in before Rolling Fork and Cedar Springs, and then the wind tornado, the Little Rock tornado. But what I'm seeing and we see so often, and what you're looking at on the screen right here is a trailer home park. And you'll notice you don't see anything that resembles a trailer home. You will notice that you can see some cars. This is in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, about 10 days ago with that EF4 that went through there. But you can see some of these cars. Now, some of these cars may have come from somewhere else, but many of them were parked in this trailer park. And you can see they even did better than what some of really any of the mobile homes that were there. And we say that all the time. You just can't be in a mobile home during a tornado. And, I understand that's easy for us to say, but in practice, to really expect somebody to, every time there's a tornado watch, they're going to go somewhere else. I realize that's not very practical for most people. But Dan, I think on these kind of big days, tomorrow night that we're facing potentially, you can see there, that was the before, and you can see all those trailer homes. And then as I flew my drone over that area, you can see what it looked like afterwards. But on these big event days, I think that's sometimes maybe a situation that you plan ahead if you live in a trailer home or a mobile home, modular home, and find another place to stay. Again, I know that's easy for us to say. It's hard to do. The odds are it's not going to hit you. I mean, that's just the geographical odds of it. But the story that I was telling on something I put on social media this earlier today, I was down in Oklahoma in November on a deadly tornado there, and occasionally at the Weather Channel we'll have off-duty police officers have to be with us in certain situations, and the police sergeant there asked me, he said, we get tornado warnings all the time and nothing ever happens. I know, Dan, you hear that too, and I get it. But I asked him, I said, let me ask you this question. I said, are you wearing a bulletproof vest? And he said, well, yes, sir, I am. I said, let me ask you this. Do you even know a police officer who's ever been shot? And he said, well, no, I don't. I said, but even in the hot Oklahoma summers, you're still wearing your bulletproof vest. He said, well, yes, sir. And I said, the odds are overwhelming you'll never be shot, but you wear the vest just in case. And I think that applies to the tornado warnings. The odds are even when you have a tornado warning, it's not going to hit your home or your house. But to take the 15 or 30 minutes and get into your safe spot, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's sort of putting on your bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
But if you live in a mobile home, there's no safe spot in the home.
That's like not having a bulletproof vest and going to a gun range.
Right.
It really is.
And what I've seen, Dan, I was in Wynn, and when I first got into the town, some family members were yelling, and I went over there, and here's a lady laying on the ground, and I had to check for a pulse with this lady, and unfortunately, she didn't have one. And in that situation, I prayed with the family just to try to give them some comfort in that situation. But her and her 4 children were in a mobile home, and this tornado it had been on the ground for a while, or at least produced, and that cell was coming this way. So it's not the situation, well, I don't think this one's going to do any damage.
Mm-hmm.
But it really does happen.
Yeah.
It really does hit. And so I don't know. I want to try to get that message out as best I can, Dan. I know we're in all different ways on the Weather Channel and you at KNWA Fox 24 and meteorologists all over the country continually say this, but somehow we just need to try to convince, especially on these big days, that maybe they could do something different. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Dan? What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. And, you know, I can't say that I've seen in my entire chasing career how much you have seen devastation wise in the last 2 weeks. Yeah. I mean, it's got to hit home for Rolling Fork and for, I mean, so many places, you know, Amory. I mean, it's just been a devastating year with tornadoes. And you see that damage firsthand. And so it's absolutely incredible. But I've got this on the screen here, a couple of safety tips that Charles just mentioned. Never stay in a mobile home. Leave them, please, for a sturdier structure. Now, there's also the argument, well, what about people getting out in a tornado, you know, driving and trying to get away from it? That's kind of tough to do. But like you said, with these bigger tornadoes, typically, you know, they're coming in advance. We're able to track the debris signature. We're able to know with fairly good accuracy, I would say, what impacts it's going to bring, what town it's going to hit, what location it's going to be at. If you're in that path, and maybe you're not directly in the path, the storm can turn. You'd want to get to a sturdier structure. But you said it great. Tomorrow night, if you live in a mobile home, it might be one of those nights where you stay with a family member or you stay with someone that has a sturdy structure.
Right. Also, Dan, and one of the things that you're talking about in the vehicle, if you do get caught in your vehicle in a tornado situation, make sure you leave it running. The airbags will not deploy if you turn your vehicle off. But if you leave your car running, bend down and get below the window level. So if debris comes into the car, now please hear me. The vehicle is not a safe place, but if you by chance get stuck and that's all you have, make sure you leave your car running. Even if you pull over the side of the road, get down below the, and I guess make sure you pull over before you get down below. And then, you know, you hope for the best in that situation. In a lot of cases, what we're trying to encourage people to do is find the safest place you can be.
Yeah.
It may not be a safe place. Even the home you might go to, a friend's home that's a better built structure, could get hit by one of these stronger tornadoes and it be destroyed. So there's, you know, other than underground, if an underground option is for you, but we're trying to encourage you to look, and you can see where Dan's showing right now the safest place. Not always is there an interior room with no windows. So you have to just look at your particular situation and find the safest place that you can be.
I loved your Weather Channel. I was watching the coverage. I was just glued to it with that tornado outbreak after Little Rock because, you know, that tornado event just kept going and going and going. And they had Paul Goodlow had a graphic where it was like best, and then like let me I'm going to try to word it the way that he had it because it's exactly what you're talking about. I took a photo on my phone. I take it back. It wasn't Paul Goodlow. He's that's old school for me on the Weather Channel. But there is. I'm going to bring this up full. All right, Charles. So
bro.
People can see it on the phone. But this is essentially the graphic right here. So it had worst, bad, good, and best. So the worst is mobile homes, vehicles, and let's see what else it says. Overpasses. Bad is large rooms, gymnasiums, manufactured homes. Good, interior room or basement. I love this graphic. I'm actually going to steal it, if you will.
Yeah, that's Alex Wallace and Jen Carfagno. And in that segment, they took They took a video picture, a drone picture I had of one of the houses in Silver City, where the only thing left standing of the home was the interior bathroom.
Yeah.
And how we talk about that interior room, and we use that as an example. I'm sorry I didn't send that to you, but that
No, I saw that actually. I watched that's the segment that they showed it. I just took a picture of the graphic, but I saw the video, and you see the interior closet, and that's the only thing left standing.
It was actually a bathroom, Dan.
Bathroom.
And the bathrooms, one other thing, in some of the walls, they've got the piping and stuff, the water piping. And so sometimes that makes those walls a little more sturdier than a traditional wall because you've got plumbing and everything in it. So if it's a bathroom and an interior room, that's going to be the ideal situation there.
So I've got a question on here. Of course, we got to get to the forecast, but I do have an interesting question about storm shelters. There is someone that made a public storm shelters map. I'm going to share my screen here. There are not many in Northwest Arkansas. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Charles, but we're going to share the screen here in just a second, and you get to see this. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, needless to say, to have a public shelter is, ideal. Is somewhat the chicken or the egg, which comes first, because so many times we have these shelters and then people just don't use them. So then it's like, well, why are we spending money as a city or a county or state to build these if people aren't going to use them? But then on the flip side, if we finally can convince people to use them, then there's not one to go to if they don't have it. Unfortunately, what happens in a lot of areas, and this is true in the South, I know Alabama now, a lot more storm shelters, but that comes after a big event. You have a big deadly event, and then all of a sudden the funding comes to be able to build those shelters. I know, for an example, I want to say it's the last 10 years in Alabama after the Enterprise tornado. Now all schools that are built have to have a storm shelter in safe room in them.
Now, wasn't that March 1st, 2007?
Dan, you're the man with the beautiful memory I can't remember where I was last week,
Well, let's see here. Enterprise, Alabama. We'll pick you up. I think it's going to be March 1st, 2007. And there it is.
Well, listen, Dan, one of the things I posted on my Facebook page is, and I know a lot of people with this big event are really concerned about the forecast and the deep dive of everything. So
let's do that.
Thank you for letting me talk about this, but I know we want to let you get to the most important thing here.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the forecast. Just real quick, here's the shelters. There's a Pea Ridge one. It shows that this is the Pea Ridge schools. It shows the address. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share this link. I think that would be helpful, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. So, I reshared that link on I think it's the same one.
Yeah. And it might be that Chris Reese guy that put it together. But I've seen it shared on a bunch of other things. Here's the link, folks. Here's the public shelters link. I just posted it on everything. So that is going to be the public tornado shelters link, and then that will take you to this, and then that shows you the limited amount of shelters. There's one in Greenland. This is at the Greenland schools. There's one in Prairie Grove off of Viney Grove, and there's one in Huntsville. There's just none in Fayetteville, none in Springdale, none in Johnson. Let's get to the forecast here, and we'll start.
Can I say one last thing, Dan, and then I'll skip off and let you do your thing?
No, I'd love to have you on. We'll just
okay. And I know you've seen some of these videos. I saw a bunch of them around Little Rock. Listen, people, in a real dangerous tornadic situation, we don't have to have the videos of it. If I can get it out there trained and be able to do it safely, but going to the glass door and trying to get video of a tornado that's coming, or standing on your front porch, or whatever other dangerous situation, Dan, you've seen those. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little, but that it's not that important.
It's not, and it could cost you your life. And I know you're seeing the video, and it is spectacular, showing the power of tornadoes, but it's not a good move. And there's a lot of people that were very, 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 very lucky that they survived. There's one video of the EF3 that came through very close to the fire station, Rodney Parham and I-430, and you see in 10 seconds the landscape just completely change. It is an absolute sobering video, but it shows the power of tornadoes and why you need to take them seriously. So let's get to some graphics here, and we'll take a look. Charles, we still have you on, and you pop on whenever you want to interject anything. But here's kind of the look at the latest timing. Now, there's going to be multiple rounds of storms, but this is the most likely timing is late tomorrow night. Now, there are hints that maybe this comes in a little earlier, around 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, but I think around 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. is going to be that time window for severe weather potential, including tornado potential. We're going to look at a couple of different models here. And first of all, this is the latest HRRR, and it really doesn't show a whole lot of instability. Now, Charles, the thing that I don't like about these future track models and all the models in general is they've been too cool on the temperatures. They were way too cool today. If they're too cool, that's going to completely throw off your thermodynamics, your profile, and really, honestly, your instability. And so it just basically means that, you're not going to have much instability. So the models are going to underdo the amount of precipitation. That's just, unfortunately, that's what we're looking at. Like here, it's showing cloud cover and rain. If it really is in the mid 70s and it's cooling us off instead of the lower 80s, then maybe the storms will be a little bit less. But that sometimes shows up as a lot of rain, Zach. And what is it? It's nothing.
Yeah. And that would suppress the severe storm potential.
If that does happen. But what have you seen in your, over the last, like this weekend and stuff like that?
Yeah, the models have been really bad on the afternoon highs. They've been going super cool. And today we saw a record high temperature, Dan, Fayetteville, 85 degrees. So usually for this time of year, when we have those warmer temps, it means an active pattern and storms for this time of year. So definitely active pattern, definitely going warmer than what these models say. And that means that the severe storm potential is going to be higher too.
It's really warm out there right now, and the models are saying we're going to be in the mid 60s. Yeah. And it's like, I think our dew point is going to be in the mid 60s. So here's what we've got. This is the latest HRRR, and I do think that there might be a round of storms in the evening. And you can see that kind of flares up pretty quick around 7, 8 o'clock. We're going to dive into the details on the tornado parameters, but you're going to notice here that moves out. That's not the end of the severe weather risk. Look at what happens at midnight. And Charles, these are isolated supercells. That's trouble. Yep. But what people have to realize is this is not exactly where the storms are going to be. This is just a depiction of where the models think the storm is going to track.
Right. And specifically one model in this particular case.
Specifically the HRRR, just one model. But honestly, we can't look at any other models because they really don't break out a lot of storms.
Right.
But what we can do is we can look at the ingredients, and I'm sure you've looked at this as well. Here's a look at the significant tornado parameter, and it gets up there. I mean, it goes really high, and there you see at midnight. Now, one of the reasons that it starts dropping at this point is because it's showing thunderstorms over Fort Smith, so that's why there's that little hole, and it says that maybe those storms move into northwest Arkansas as well. The only thing I could say is that maybe the latest HRRR is a little faster than what the original model showed. Let's look at a different model. This is the graph, and it's showing 72 right now. It doesn't show any storms during the day. Honestly, I think there's going to be limited storm activity because of the cap. I think, Charles, you can agree the caps looks to be pretty strong tomorrow. Maybe so strong that it suppresses all thunderstorm development.
However, potentially, Dan, couldn't that potentially make the nighttime storms even worse?
It can if the wind shear keeps up. And actually, there's signs that the wind shear will increase dramatically as we move into the overnight hours, which is what cranks that tornado potential. So there it is at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. This is the graph. And now it's starting to show more isolated development. It doesn't look like much. But remember, that's because it's only showing temperatures in the low 70s. I think we're going to have dew points in the upper 60s to lower 70s. Now, Charles, I know you probably look at this model, but this is called the Texas Tech WRF, and it is really good, isn't it? It's not
Hey,
perfect.
Dan, I use it a lot when I'm in the Texas, Oklahoma area. I haven't paid attention to it as much for Western Arkansas. Is it pretty good? Does it handle this area pretty well?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And I'm going to share that on my screen here real quick. And I'm going to show you one of the things that makes us kind of a little bit on edge with this storm potential. Now, the 5 hours is the newest run, so we can't do that. We'll have to go to the previous run. And the previous run is the 18Z. So let's go ahead and we'll go to previous run. And I don't know if you've seen this or not, but if we look at updraft helicity and reflectivity, guess what we've got here? We've got 2 isolated supercells that are coming right through Northwest Arkansas. 3Z, by the way, is 10 o'clock in the evening. So 10 to 11 o'clock, that looks pretty rough, doesn't it, Charles?
Yeah, that one, if that verifies that way, it's going to be a rough evening for Northwest Arkansas.
Now, the thing is, too, is that these are high impact but low coverage. Because you'll notice, like Northwest Benton County, if this is an isolated supercell, and this is really exactly where it tracks, like Bella Vista, Sulphur Springs, Decatur, Gentry, they're not going to see anything because it's an isolated storm. However, and I say this with caution, this is not exactly where the storms are going to be, but it gives you an idea of what you can expect. Now, another thing is we look at the updraft helicity, and this is a pretty impressive updraft helicity track that goes right through Washington County. And that's kind of maxed out. And honestly, I've been looking at the different model runs, and it's been pretty consistent, wouldn't you say, Zach?
Yeah, it sure has. And again, this is the measure of the rotation in the atmosphere. So you could see some rotating storms with that. Tornado potential definitely going to be there for tomorrow evening into the overnight.
Yeah, so if you're just hopping on, we do have that moderate risk of severe weather. Now, Charles, I personally think, in my opinion, if the models continue to uptrend and tick up on the on essentially the thunderstorm coverage, that this could be increased to possibly a high risk. I know that's questionable, but the ingredients are there. The threat is there. It's a moderate risk. I think this is going to shift a little west because the dry line retreats. And so I think you're going to see a shift westward in this moderate risk. I don't think they go high risk at 6Z, but I do think probably maybe 1630 if the models start showing more and more.
Right.
What do you
They've got time to hold on that. But a couple of things I'd like to say, Dan, is remembering even Friday that Little Rock was not in the high risk area. And so, you got to remember when you see these threat areas, and then help me because you're the expert with all the dates, because I remember in the fall, excuse me, I was down in Shreveport and my phone went off at 4:00 in the morning because the biggest threat area that day was in Louisiana and Mississippi. But we woke up at 4:30 in the morning to something in Northwest Arkansas, and the EF3 tornado in a 5% tornado risk area up here was the tornado of the day. So we have to remember that any risk area is still a risk. Now, also, we're not trying to scare you. Don't panic in this situation. It is something that the parameters are there that could be a dangerous night. We think the potential is there. No need to panic. Just need to have a plan. Think through your plan, what's going to be the safest thing for you, and be ready to implement that plan. Have multiple ways to get your warnings, and especially with it being an overnight event, have a way that it can wake you up. Whether radio is going to be one of the best ways, your phone, make sure don't put it in a silent mode and then it not be able to wake you up if that's what you're depending on. So,
yeah, absolutely. Charles, I want to share something here. And this is going to be tornado sirens. First of all, an outdoor warning system is the tornado siren. Now, the problem is it's kind of a catch-22 because a lot of people, unfortunately, will take action if they hear the sirens. It's an old, antiquated technology. Is it effective? Only if you're outside, essentially. On top of that, what happened in Rolling Fork? Did the siren sound?
I didn't find anybody that said they heard it. There's only one in the town, and I know it got destroyed by the tornado. We tried to do a little follow up with that. So I don't know what the situation was, but anybody I talked to, nobody said they heard the sirens. But again, it was at night. They could have been in the house. The siren could have gone off, and it's a 1950s, I believe, technology back when a lot more of us were outdoors all the time, and it's just not a reliable way to get your warnings.
It's not, absolutely. And so never solely rely on them as your only warning method. Have additional warnings and potential to get warnings. So one of the best ways is a weather radio. Do you have a weather radio? If you don't have a weather radio, yes, they may go off all the time, but that's the point of them. And you can program them to where they go off just for tornado warnings or just for severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings. So really, really important. Fayetteville has a siren system at the University of Arkansas. That's it. That's the only place. Sometimes you can hear them, but the problem is with the wind and with the storms, you're probably not going to hear them. And you're definitely not going to hear them inside. Bella Vista doesn't have sirens because they're not effective. It's not cost effective because the terrain is going to prevent the sound from getting out there. So what do you say we geek out and look at some of the threats and also some of the model data in terms of the soundings? Because the soundings they're looking pretty impressive from what I saw. Everything does line up if we do get isolated storms. Also, too, the SIPS analogs reminds me of a specific date. By the way, you talked about dates. That was the Springdale tornado, March 30th of last year, where there's still damage to this day from that tornado. So you can imagine how long it's going to be for the cleanup in Little Rock. And by the way, we appreciate storm spotters like you so much, because for those that didn't know, one of the only ways that we knew the tornado was touching down, or should I say Little Rock Television knew it was touching down, was a storm spotter. It was Brett Adair. He was out on it. You could see it developing. He had a view of it developing over Fitness 10. He was in a perfect location, just like you are a lot of times, Charles. And,
you talked about Rodney, I think Rodney Parham and 430. That's where Brett was at that time.
Yeah. And you can hear a little nervousness in his voice, but that inflow tail started to develop. The circulation ramped up dramatically. This is the type of environment tomorrow night that we will see that potential for significant storm development and rapid significant storm development. And I'll show you why. But first of all, here is a look at the threats for tomorrow. Tornadoes, some strong, are possible. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be updated here in about an hour and a half. So we're going to see what happens. Large hail is also a possibility, and damaging winds are a possibility. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is the damaging hail or the large hail a little bit farther west? That's where the storms are going to initially develop. So when the storms are more mature, farther to the east, according to this update, that's where the tornado potential is when the storms are about half hour to an hour within their development time. So here's a look at the large hail. When the storms initially develop, they will already be having the potential to produce large hail. And I'll tell you what, Charles, I don't know if you've seen some of the dew point forecasts. They are outrageous. So watch this. Well, this is showing a dew point of 66 right now. What is our dew point? Let's find out right now what we've got. So we look at dew point regional, it's not 66, it's 57. So that's a little overdone. But you get the idea. But look at that dew point that's starting to surge northward. And then you can see it just coming in here. And, we haven't seen these deep yellows this close to our area, Charles.
Yeah.
It's a little slower, too. Look at that. 4, 5, 6 a.m. It's going to be a long, long night.
Which model is this, Dan?
This is this is called the graph model. The IBM graph. And we could show some different ones, but this is the IBM graph. Yeah. Let's look at the 3 kilometer what do you think about the 3 kilometer NAM? Not great, is it?
Well, I use it just more for confirmation aspects. I mean, again, I'm trying to look at multiple things, but one of the things the Storm Prediction Center keeps talking about in this, and some of the individual forecasters even putting out on Twitter, is reminding us that synoptically, this setup, especially in this southern part, that's what they're looking at more so than what the cams are showing at this point in time.
Exactly. You know why? Because the day before the Little Rock tornado, the models had very little convection. And I'll show you the reasoning behind that. Let's look at the future track model. And so it barely shows anything, and now it's showing a little bit of storm. That's definitely a lot more. And look, that's kind of like a line of supercells, isn't it? That's a broken line of storms.
Yeah, Dan, do you feel like you were talking about the maturity of the supercells as they get going? Do you feel like in this kind of environment with some of the parameters almost off the chart, that they may actually develop a lot faster than normal?
Yeah, I do. And I also think that's going to end up shifting the risk to the west. And that's one of the things that, especially with the slower solutions that we're kind of seeing. So I do agree with that. Here's a look at the 2-day precipitation forecast. I'll bring this up full here real quick just so you guys can see it. There's our timing. So we have a little bit of isolated activity that's going to be possible during the early morning hours tomorrow, but it's very limited, but we have it in there. Right, Zach?
Yeah, because see a few isolated storms, but it shouldn't be a big deal. It's not severe, right?
Yeah, not severe. As we move into, but I haven't done my doubts that happens because it looks like it is capped. We're going to look at the models here in just a bit. 40% for early evening, and then it bumps way up after midnight. I think late evening into midnight, that's when that time window really spikes up. So, I sure hope so, Amanda. Don't you, Charles? The Fayetteville fizzle, the Colby effect. That's what we're hoping for, man. We are hoping for a dud, honestly.
I'm not a believer in the Fayetteville fizzle or the Colby effect. I know we joke about it, but even in my role as a storm tracker with the Weather Channel, somebody was talking about being disappointed, and trust me, with the kind of death and destruction I see with these, I'm not going to be disappointed one iota if we don't have a single storm at all.
Yeah, if the cap holds, that'd be an absolute blessing. So
I don't think that's going to happen, though, as a caveat. But that's my hope.
So here's a look at the water vapor, and boy, look at that energy. Now, something that I wanted to point out that you probably know, Charles, but models really, and I mean really, struggle with this type of energy that comes in from the southwest near Baja. Why is that? There's no upper air sounding network. There's no airplanes that are flying through there, very limited. And the only thing they detect is satellite. That kind of gets implemented in some of the model data, but it's not a very good weighing scale. So there is all sorts of pieces of energy that are lifting northeast that ripple in that could fire off storms way more than what the models are showing. And so when we look at that in terms of how the model looks, there's the strong system. Number one, the European said this system was going to come down like this and then go like this. It doesn't look like it's doing that. It looks like it's almost still digging at this point. So originally it had it north of the Four Corners region. I would go to say that is still digging, meaning it's dropping south, meaning it's still strengthening. If we look at the vorticity, this is the European, and this is, you've seen this. This is a big system. This has very similar implications to what happened on Friday with two areas of severe weather potential. No doubt the greater forcing is going to be to the north. That's just a given.
Right.
But see all these little ripples that are coming through. If you look at eastern Oklahoma, Texas, those ripples right there will probably be stronger than what the models show, and that will fire off thunderstorms. And therefore, all the forecast about the timing of the rain and the storm potential and all that stuff being only in the evening, that's where you got to be cautious and careful what you're talking about. So there's a look at the future track with the European, and the European has some storms. It doesn't really show much. Now, remember, this is not a convection allowing model, what we call a CAM, and then it shows that squall line kind of moving in. I would be impressed if this doesn't develop anything, because this is a look at the surface map. And Charles, this just looks primed, man. That is about as classic and as textbook as it gets, with a dry line to the west, surging east, lots of energy, maybe a strong cap potentially, but definitely fuel for thunderstorms. And because of that, we're going to look at some soundings. While I'm doing that, Charles, I'll let you add whatever else you want on that.
Well, I think it was Storm Prediction Center or somewhere I read today, the aspect that normally when that cold front, it undercuts everything and sort of the tornado risk goes down some, but they feel like in this particular situation, it's going to almost function more like a dry line as the front's pushing through and initiate storms rather than making them just line out more so.
Yeah, what we've got to watch is that those linear storms and then the isolated storms out ahead of it. Those are the ones that we really have to watch. So we're going to look at some model soundings, and what we're going to use is Pivotal Weather. I also have Buff Kit. I don't have it loaded right now. We actually just did a severe weather run through with our production staff, with our directors, and just kind of get ready. It's something that honestly, we have new staff, we have new people, and so I think that's really important to do. So let's look at.
Just want to say something real quick, please, because of what we're talking about. We're not discounting. Some people are talking about Iowa and up there. We're not discounting that there's going to be a threat up there at all. We're just, since this is the area that we're in, I can tell you with the Weather Channel today, initially I was going to be going up to the northern play. And then as this thing developed through the day and we talked more about it, decided that it was better for me to stay down here for this situation. So we do think this is there, but I would be surprised if we don't have some big tornadoes up in the northern play as well.
Yeah, they're absolutely. I think they're absolutely will, and I totally 100% agree with you there. That risk still looks pretty substantial too. So maybe I'm kind of looking at. I'll bring this up here. I just want to make sure that we've got it. So it looks like the atmospheric profile is kind of lessening according to the 18Z European. The 12Z European showed a little bit more substantial, and I'm going to bring that up here real quick, and we'll break down the latest. Yeah, so here's what we've got. All right, so Charles, I'll let you kind of explain what a PDS tour is, but that's the Texas Tech WRF. So I'm gonna load up another one. So you're gonna see some verbiage on here, especially when we look at the models here. This is the Pivotal Weather 12Z European. Yes, it's got a little bit of a Cape Robber there. This is at 21Z. We'll continue to advance forward. There is the 3Z, and then there's the 6Z. So if we go back in time, it looks like the instability is a little bit greater. And so there's what's looking like a pretty impressive profile. Now we look at this right here, and there's PDS Tour. Charles, tell us what PDS Tour is.
PDS is a particularly dangerous situation tornado, and what it is the software program that runs this. This is taking the model data and it's pulling it out in all these different places, and it's looking at various parameters that are already programmed into the software and saying we feel like this could be a very dangerous situation. Now, I can tell you, I know Dan well enough, and for myself, we don't go and just look for that one thing. We're going to look at all the parameters to figure out, what we're looking at. Dan, I can't quite see that. What was it looking like as far as the speed of these storms? Are we going to have the same?
You know what? Did I have it full screen? Yeah, I'll show you the speed of the storms. That's a good question. Let me go ahead and make this full screen so people can see that. I think that might help. Stand by here. There we go. We'll make this full screen, and we'll go back to the sounding here. Got a lot of windows open. Let's see. Is that the right one? Yep, that's the right one. Can you still see it? Okay. I want to go back to the European because that's what you were looking at, right? We were looking at the 12Z European on that PDS tour. We'll go out a few hours here. Let's see what we got for storm speed. I don't think it's super fast, honestly. Well, I take that back. 49 knots to the east-northeast or to the northeast. So, yeah, they're moving pretty good. About 50 knots for the movement.
And you may, for the viewers, they may say, well, what does that have to really mean? What difference? That means that you're going to have a lot less lead time for the warnings. When you're moving that fast, once that warning happens, it's going to be on top of you. Before, I talked to a lady in Wynn on Saturday morning, and she said she got the warning. She got in her car, and she was going to drive over to her mother's house, and it hit her, totally destroying her car. She was okay, but that was lucky. She said, I thought I had enough time to get over there. But when those storms are moving that fast, you won't have near as much time as you normally think you would.
That's a great point. And that's when we're tracking those storms too, at that time, Charles, we got to remember that as well, that our radar, if it's moving at 50 miles an hour, if they don't have the Sales 2 on there and we're getting updates every 3 minutes, it's already in advance of the storm.
Right.
So we've got to be careful remembering that. There's a look at the sounding. Look at even if we don't get a tornado, look at the hail potential here. So these are the significant hail reports that came out of this type of storm. You had 4.25, which is over softball size. That's almost grapefruit. Baseballs. And that's just basically saying that this sounding right here represents a significant hail and significant supercell with a 65% tornado match. And the ingredients are there. There's just no doubt about it. That's why we're watching this potential so closely.
Hey, Dan, I'm seeing in the comments just real quickly as I'm glancing, maybe some people have tuned in to us later, but I know this is going to be a big thing. Could you show that graphic you have for the timing again real quick?
Yes, sir. We'll take a look at both of them. I've got 2 sets of timing graphics. So we'll bring this up, and we'll bring this up full. So here is a look at the timing. This is and I think this timing will be adjusted somewhat, but 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., and 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. So we're talking overnight. Now, I want to say this carefully, that there could be additional energy that could fire off storms a little earlier, right?
Yeah, and it's looking like it's kind of slowing down here. The latest models.
I think it is
So
slowing
you
down.
might have
a
to
little
extend
bit.
that 5 a.m.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a good point. So we'll probably most likely adjust that. Also, too, the newest GFS is coming out right now. In fact, it's way beyond coming out. I don't typically look at the GFS all that often. Somewhat, it's a good model to look at. Let's see what it has. All of them have the instability. It'll just probably, it's terrible with temperatures, so it's just basically not even worth it. Honestly, Texas Tech WRF looks good. I saw someone comment that the FB3 has some severe weather potential, so we'll look at that. And in another time,
typically is a pretty aggressive model too.
The ARW,
no,
the FB3,
FE3,
yeah.
Especially with your helicity tracks.
Yeah. So it looks like it is. And all right. So there's a look at let's bring up severe weather. We'll bring up a helicity tracks. Let's see. So we'll run up this. All right. So here's a look at the helicity tracks. And I know I don't have this up on the screen yet. I'm making sure it's even worth showing. So here's the thing, like models aren't going to detect all this energy, and they're not going to be able to determine exactly where everything is at. So let's bring this up full. We'll take a look at this right here. This is the NSSL WRF, or no, excuse me, the FB3 WRF. And so you're going to notice here, HRW has a little bit of isolated storm development, a little bit of a track, but it is showing that potential in northwest Arkansas. And that storm won't be any slouch. That's going to be a pretty significant storm. If, in fact, that really does come to fruition. Boy, that really looks like some supercells, doesn't it, Charles?
It does.
Man. And those are way out ahead of the main line. As the line comes through, This is 10Z. We still have storms. Zach, I think you're right. I think this
5
is
a.m.
definitely slowing down.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely slowing down. Let's see what SIGTOR parameter looks like. So you can see that surge north, and then it kind of moves to the east. There is something interesting. I don't know if you saw that, Charles. If we look at the upper level winds, we're going to have to do this on a different model. But all the models have been showing that increase in low level winds dramatically at you can't get 925 on here, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that you can get and you can't get, but the low level jet increases dramatically just about right before midnight. So here's a look at the winds. They're very strong. They kind of subside, they weaken, and look at what they do, and they crank up overnight. Boy, that is some strong 850 winds, isn't it, Charles?
Yeah. And Dan, just for geeking out purposes, why does that matter?
Okay, good question. The reason that matters is what it does is it increases the low-level helicity. So helicity is what essentially makes a thunderstorm rotate. And rotation in a storm comes from the change in wind direction with height. So you have a storm that basically is moving to the northeast, and you have a southerly wind at the surface, and then you turn those winds to the southwest aloft. What that does is that creates a spin, and especially this straight line right here on the photograph represents essentially a horizontal spin. So that horizontal spin, what it essentially is it's a rolling of basically the ground. Hold on just a second. Bring this over here. There we go. And we'll drag this over this way. There we go. Now I got everything loaded up. So it's a horizontal rolling of the ground, and then the storm, what it does is if it's it's a perpendicular to the shear vector, which is parallel to that horizontal vortex line. What it does is it can pull it up into the vertical and essentially develop the tornado. And in fact, I've got a great graphic that represents this. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, Charles, but this is an illustration of perfect streamwise vorticity. So I'm going to bring this up full because this is in all its glory, Charles. This is the critical angle. So the storm motion is parallel to this horizontal vortex tube. You can see how the winds aloft are increasing that horizontal spin. So we talked about how the winds are strengthening. That's creating wind shear. Wind shear creates that horizontal vortex tube. Well, here comes the storm that's paralleling that horizontal vortex tube. And what it does, that pulls it up into the vertical, which essentially makes it start spinning. Now, when the storm stretches and tilts because of the amount of energy and the dynamics and the good old 3D equation of motion, that tilting and stretching makes the rotation gets faster, just like what we have with a figure skater, a figure skater that has rotating arms, and that rotation gets faster. And what that does is that causes the tornado to develop. And so essentially that rotation gets stronger, and you have the rotation coming down to the ground. So hopefully that makes some sense. What do you think, Charles?
No, absolutely. I mean, and you're showing aspects to it that if you're watching it, most times you won't be able to see all those dynamics, even as you're watching it form.
No, absolutely not. But there are times.
Amanda was just asking, we're talking about it maybe slowing down, the system slowing down, and she wanted to know if that's bad or not.
Yeah. That's a great question because bad is, if it slows down, that allows more time for moisture and instability to develop. And then what that does is that creates a bigger window for storms, which unfortunately can mean more impacts. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, and sometimes we think, later in the night, the threat level in many cases goes down a little. But I want to remind that situation back with that Fayetteville Springdale tornado. I know you'll know exactly the time, but wasn't it about 4 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 4 a.m. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it can happen in the middle of the night.
It absolutely can. It can be in the early morning. And the Cincinnati tornado was also 6 a.m. in the morning. on December 31st, 2010. So it's also the warm and cold winds mixing together. You know what that does, Margaret? You can't have the thunderstorm unless you have the warm and the cold winds mixing together, which essentially forms a thunderstorm. And you're not going to pull that air upwards unless you get the thunderstorm. So that's why you need that hot and the cold air. And that's what we're going to get with the collision, as we saw earlier with this with the surface map. There's so many other things to show, Charles, but I think we need to kind of wind it down because we're going to have a very, very, very long night tomorrow as we're tracking these storms. But I just want to show you this is what we're talking about with that clash of the warm and the cold air. That forms the thunderstorms, and those thunderstorms will be moving through. So Amanda said she slept through the warnings of that Fayetteville Springdale tornado. So
well, part of that, if you'll remember on that situation, because it was a quick QLCS spin up tornado that was an EF3. Sometimes we think, oh, it's just a little spin up. They can still be strong. But as you remember, because it came in, the warning didn't come out until it was actually passed. I know we live a mile from it, and the warning on the weather radio never went off because when they put the warning out, it was already past where we live.
Absolutely true. 100%. And because the warning wasn't out, it was a tough storm. It really was. I mean, there were many things going against the Weather Service on that one. Let's see. Do we have the newest threat guide?
And Dan, let's just say that, and please correct me if you feel I'm looking at this wrong. Again, we don't want you panicking on this.
Yep.
But take any storm that we have late tomorrow night into the overnight. Just go ahead and assume it's tornadic. Take your safety preparation in that situation. And this is one of those setups that about any storm that gets going has that potential to go tornadic. And that way you're ready to be there if the storms come through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Charles, this day really reminds me of March 12th, 2006. March 12th, 2006 was a very devastating day when the tornado came through right through Benton County. So tornado tie is definitely going to be happening, and I might be wearing that Hook Echo tie. I got to share this with you because this is going to be one last thing that I show. This is really geeking out. But what we're going to be looking at is what's called the SIPS analogs. So SIPS analogs is basically saying the computers have the ability to say this weather system that's coming in, what it does is it looks similar to many other weather systems, and it has the top analogs. And I don't know if you noticed, this is the top analog, which is March 12th, 2006. There's the jet stream energy. There's the system, there's the low-level jet, you name it, all that stuff. Now, if we go back, we can take a look at some of the other analogs, which, by the way, earlier included the Branson tornado. Now that Branson tornado is out of there, but it also had a devastating day. Look at, there's Enterprise, Alabama, March 1st, 2007. I can tell you firsthand there was severe weather in Fort Smith and in Northwest Arkansas, and I was covering so many tornadoes that night I lost my voice. That was a very bad day. It also brought some massive hail into the Fort Smith area. So you can see some of the analogs. And the reason I'm showing you that is because this storm system means business. And if we look at, this is March 1st, 2000, March 12th, 2006. That's a lot of tornado reports. That's a lot of severe weather reports. This is essentially what a perfect forecast would be for that event. And then we can look at the SPC storm reports, and you can see that we got clipped from that severe weather event. So this is definitely a serious weather situation. There was also some massive hail from that storm. So, well, here we are on April 4th, and Charles, this is it. We're counting down the hours. So,
Dan, one last thing I'd like to just circle back to the trailer home. If you live in a well-built home and you know somebody that lives in a trailer home, hey, give them a call and invite them to come stay with you for the evening. I mean, give them an option. And if you live in one, please try to find a safe place tomorrow night. But I think in a lot of ways, if one of the things we say at the Weather Channel all the time, we see it after the fact. It comes down to people helping people, and we see that after the storms. But in this case, maybe we can do it before the storms and maybe prevent something.
Yeah, absolutely. But great of information. Charles, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Because of this storm, I think we're going to give the 8-ball a rest. It's too serious, and I don't really want to joke around. I know Larry's asking for the 8-ball. That's our official forecast. Not really, but the 8-ball is actually pretty accurate. It's actually not bad. But I think what we'll do is we'll give that a rest tonight. Maybe bring it out tomorrow, but we really have to be on our guard, and we're going to be totally geared up. So baseball games, they cancel them tomorrow. Not exactly sure. I know that they're doing that because of safety reasons. There may be storms in the evening. I personally think everything's going to kind of hold off until tomorrow night, just with the cap and everything. So one last thing. This is my last thing to show you is that if you don't have our weather app, it's a great source. Shameless plug, Charles, but scan that QR code. We'll keep you updated. Take a screenshot of that, and then your family and friends can have that app as well. Really, really important. To have that. But we do have technology to detect where the tornadoes are. We've got a great product called PTDS. It's only as good as when the tornado's touching down doing damage. So we'll give you a heads up before that happens.
It's a great product, isn't it?
It really is. It's absolutely fabulous. And I think we could be in for a PDS tornado watch, looking at all the parameters tomorrow. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. Charles, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Zach,
Charles.
have a good one.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, be safe. Get some Baja Blasts, man. Get some energy. All right. We'll see you. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. God bless.